Deku? I think he's some pro. By clouds. My head in the clouds, not coming down. Chapter 62. Publicity. Eraserhead slammed open the door without any preamble. Quirk already activated, even though he knew full well that it wouldn't have any effect on Izuku.
You're grounded.
Izuku sighed in resignation.
I know.
Considering that they'd just finished fighting a serial killer a few hours ago, he thought that they were doing rather well, with the exception of maybe Ida, who was definitely the most injured of the three of them. Izuku had gotten out of the fight with just a few cuts and gashes from Stain, and the Nomu, in addition to some road rash and bruising, while Todoroki had hardly been injured at all. Their miraculous evasion of injuries, however, wouldn't stop Izuku from being grounded for what he pulled. In his defense, though, Ida deserved to be grounded too.
What were you thinking?
Eraser yelled.
Are you aware that you're going viral right now?
Izuku grimaced. He was, unfortunately, aware of that fact. There was a reason all three of them had switched their phones to silent shortly after arriving at the hospital. That hadn't stopped one of the orderlies from asking their autographs, but at least they were mostly able to pretend that the whole mess hadn't been caught on camera.
Aizawa-sensei.
If he hadn't had both of his arms heavily bandaged, Izuku had no doubt that Ida would be chopping the air sternly.
Such volume is inappropriate in a hospital, especially since it is in the middle of the...
Aizawa turned his glare on Ida.
Don't even get me started on you. You're lucky I don't expel you right now. The only reason why I'm not is that Nezu said he's already taking care of your discipline. But as far as I'm concerned, you're on thin fucking ice. Understood?
Ida shrunk down in his bed contritely, allowing Aizawa to focus his full wrath on his original target.
Back to you, Deku. What were you thinking? You're supposed to be an underground hero. And I know Nezu wasn't stupid enough to tell you to seek out the hero killer. So,
I wasn't tracking the hero killer, Izuku said quickly. You know that if I had been, I would have called for the appropriate backup before getting into the fight. We were just looking for evidence against Endeavor, but then the Nomu showed up and Manuel was looking for Ida. We were hoping we were wrong, but...
Wait, what?
Izuku froze and turned to look at Todoroki. To someone who didn't know him well, Todoroki looked as blank as ever. But to Izuku he looked... well, not blank. Shocked and confused were probably the closest emotions, but there was also a hefty dose of what Izuku could only describe as buffering. Izuku smiled awkwardly. Surprise? Todoroki looked at him in confusion.
Why?
Izuku looked at Aizawa, who just raised an eyebrow, making it clear that Izuku was on his own. Okay, fair. He deserved that. Why surprise? Or why was I gathering evidence on Endeavor? Because I feel like those are two different questions.
I believe Todoroki-kun wanted to know why you were compiling evidence against his father, Ida said. That seems a bit rude to do to one's friend, Midoriya.
Oh, no, it's fine, Todoroki assured him quickly. And Izuku was fairly certain that Aizawa had ducked further into his capsule weapon to hide a snort. But yes, the second question is more important. To get enough info to bring him down, of course. Nezu popped out from behind Izuku's pillow, nearly giving everyone, except for Izuku, who had guessed he was probably there, a heart attack. Aizawa and Todoroki hid their shock better than Ida did, considering that he had actually jumped out of bed. Young Midoriya has been effectively running a smear campaign against the number 2 hero for weeks now, gradually chipping away at public opinion so that we can completely destroy his career. Izuku grimaced again. I think he just managed to do that himself, though.
Don't sell yourself short, problem child, Aizawa huffed. Those articles you wrote already destabilized his foundation. If people weren't already wondering about Endeavor's competence as a hero, his PR team could probably spin this whole thing as an unlucky break against a villain that's bested dozens of other heroes, but as it is, it's going to be a scandal.
Izuku looked at him in shock, which made Aizawa roll his eyes.
What? You didn't think I'd recognize your work, problem child?
Honestly, I'm not surprised Nezu has you doing something like this in your private lessons.
You wrote those articles?
Todoroki stared at him with wide eyes.
Really?
Midoriya-kun! Ida looked positively scandalized. You're supposed to be a hero and Todoroki-kun's friend. What would even possess you to destroy his father like... Murder? Izuku reminded him. Ida flinched. You don't have any room to talk, Ida. And the situation is a lot more complicated than that. And it just got a lot more complicated.
Why?
Todoroki asked. If you were going to destroy my father's career, good riddance, by the way, shouldn't it be a good thing that the bastard did the work for you? We had a plan, Izuku whined. We were going to gradually lower public opinion over the course of several months to limit the impact on society, but now...
Now there's no way that Endeavor's disgrace won't have a ripple effect.
Aizawa rubbed his eyes tiredly.
Wonderful.
It's even worse than that, Nezu pointed out, making himself comfortable in the pile of blankets on Izuku's bed that he'd somehow managed to steal without anyone noticing. Endeavor may as well be the hero killer's final victim.
But Midoriya saved him, Ida pointed out. He doesn't even have any lasting injuries.
No, but Stain managed to shout his ideals to the world thanks to that video. Izuku sighed. Endeavor's incompetence at fighting him simply proves his point, and will make it more likely for people to buy into Stain's opinion that hero society is corrupt. Basically, society was always going to get shaken up, but because of the hero killer's society, that change will most likely be channeled into villainy.
Very good, Nezu said proudly.
Oh, well, not good. But of course, Midoriya is correct. We'll have to manage this very carefully in the coming months, of course, and see if we can minimize the damage.
Problem child.
Aizawa sounded like he was ready to crawl into his sleeping bag and never come out, and it would all be Izuku's fault.
I thought I told you that your private lessons with Nezu weren't to learn world domination.
Izuku gave a guilty smile. I'm not trying to take over the world, Razor. I'm just trying to control society's perception of things. Aizawa sighed loudly and turned to look at Nezu.
I suppose this means we're pushing the dorms forward.
Of course, Nezu replied cheerily. They'll be ready to open by the end of internships. These 3 will have provided the perfect excuse for the change, of course. Wait. Dorms? Izuku's eyes widened. Of course, we won't need to worry about Endeavor getting angrier and hurting Todoroki because he won't be able to get to him. Exactly, Nezu smiled. Though I would encourage your sister to move out, or move in with your brother for the time being. Todoroki nodded, noticeably lighter, as Izuku realized he'd been worried about receiving the brunt of Endeavor's poor publicity. She's a smart girl, but is Endeavor going to agree? Nezu's eyes twinkled ominously. He won't have a choice. He can't afford to have any more negative publicity right now.
Is anyone going to explain what's going on? Ida exclaimed. I'm highly confused.
We're switching UA to the dorms to get me away from my bastard of a father, Todoroki said simply. Izuku had to poorly stifle a giggle at both Todoroki's blunt reply and at Ida's shocked reaction. Of course, Ida had a wonderful family. He probably didn't understand why Todoroki would be so okay with Izuku destroying his father's career. Oh well, maybe by the time they were done, it might make a little more sense. But Izuku frowned slightly. We were attacked during a UA-sanctioned internship. Won't that call the school's ability to protect us into question? You were also saved by the UA principal, Nezu said gleefully. I've already announced the press conference.
Of course you have, Aizawa groaned. I'm not sure I even want to know what the hell the class is going to get up to, now that they'll be living together.
Chapter 63. Introspection.
Are you sure about this?
Toshinori asked. Looking down at the list of students' parents he'd been assigned to visit about the new dorm system. Of course, Nezu chirped. You are a teacher, and you'll have Aizawa right by your side to help you. If it's the timing you're worried about, wouldn't it be best to get these visits done by the time our students' internships officially end? That way, they simply come back and move straight into the dorms.
I suppose, Toshinori said slowly.
It wasn't the timing of these visits he was concerned by. It wasn't even the fact that he was partnered with Aizawa, who very decidedly didn't like him. No, it was that about halfway down the list, in clear print, was the name Izuku Midoriya. Toshinori had decided to trust Nighteye. His old sidekick was often wiser than he was, and had very rarely steered him wrong. Their problems were mostly disagreements about Toshinori's well-being that were both too stubborn to change their opinions on. But realizing that didn't get rid of the voice deep down that was still screaming that he would never be able to be a hero if he hadn't been lucky enough to inherit one for all. Did Nezu even realize what he was asking? He looked up, saw the glint in Nezu's eye, and sighed. Yes, the rat knew exactly what he was doing. The main problem was that Toshinori didn't. He and Aizawa would never see eye to eye on the issue of Midoriya, so this visit was mostly going to be him biting his tongue and trying not to get in trouble and get Aizawa's expulsion stare. He shuddered. Even if he wasn't a student, he was sure that Aizawa would find a way to expel him if he messed up enough. A knock on the door filled him with dread, as it swung open to reveal Aizawa himself, looking preemptively pissed off about whatever Toshinori was going to do next. Nezu grinned widely and clapped his hands. Well, you two have fun. Toshinori gulped. Hitoshi gripped the gift bag tighter as they walked towards Midoriya's room, trying not to give away the joke by cracking too early. He and Miss Joke had spent the entire morning looking for the perfect gift, and got away with calling it training because she'd spent the whole time teaching him all the dumbest jokes in her repertoire and coaching him on proper joke delivery. Then, she'd somehow managed to get permission to visit the UA students stuck in the hospital, and snuck them past the media without them even noticing. Hitoshi had thought that Aizawa was amazing at stealth, and he was, but it was so weird seeing someone as bright and loud as Joke go completely unnoticed. He had a lot to learn. Joke didn't bother knocking before throwing open the door.
What were you thinking, problem child?
Midoriya gave her a guilty smile, and Hitoshi realized that the doctors were in the middle of changing his bandages. Not too injured? Sure, maybe he hadn't been stabbed, but with all the scrapes and gashes and various states of healing, the kid was going to have bandages all over his body. Hitoshi had had his suspicions during the sports festival, but this proved it. Midoriya was completely insane. Oh well, it just made their gift all the more appropriate. He shoved the bag onto Midoriya's lap.
We got you this.
Midoriya stammered and looked helplessly at Todoroki and Ida, who Hitoshi had just realized were in the room. Maybe they should have gotten those two something as well. It was too late now, but the other two didn't seem jealous. Not that it was easy to read Todoroki's expression, and Ida's was always some variation of stern, even when he was happy, so he could be wrong, but they mostly just seemed curious. Open it, you idiot, Joke insisted. It's the least you can do after giving us all a heart attack by going off and fighting a serial killer. Midoriya chuckled awkwardly and pulled out his gift. Hitoshi's mouth twitched up into a smile at Midoriya's absolutely done expression as he held the shirt out in front of him and read the words printed on it.
Cut and sew?
Midoriya glared at Miss Joke. Seriously? Joke doubled over laughing, and even the doctors started chuckling. Hitoshi looked over at Todoroki and Ida to gauge their reactions, and finally gave in to laughter when he saw the absolutely indignant expression on Ida's face. Todoroki, however, was cracking a small smile, and his eyes were lit up in a chaotic light that Ida had never seen before. This was going to be fun.
Is that what it really says?
Todoroki almost looked excited.
Let us see.
Midoriya sighed and turned the shirt around. Sure enough, cut and sew was written across the front.
We got it from the same brand as all your usual shirts, Hitoshi added helpfully. I don't see why you're complaining when we obviously have to put a warning on you if you're going to keep running into dangerous situations.
Hitoshi smirked and accepted Miss Joke's high five. Midoriya gave them both an exaggerated, betrayed expression, while Ida currently looked like he was about to explode.
Shinso! Such a gift is entirely inappropriate, Ida finally exclaimed. You may be new to the hero course, but mocking your classmate like this...
It's fine, Ida. Midoriya cut him off. It's all in good fun, so I don't really mind. They're not actually trying to hurt me, it's just funny. He got a big grin on his face. I wonder how Mom would react if I wore this when I went home. The mood in the car was tense. They'd managed to put their differences aside while actually talking to the students' families they'd gone to so far, but honestly, all Toshinori could feel as they pulled up into the Midoriya residence was a growing sense of dread.
Come on, let's get this over with,
Aizawa said gruffly.
Just let me do the talking.
All Toshinori could do was nod stiffly, before Aizawa was already slamming his door closed and walking to the apartment. Toshinori followed hesitantly behind and got to the door just as it opened, revealing a woman with green hair who couldn't be anyone other than young Midoriya's mother. Oh, Aizawa. Midoriya-san smiled widely. How are you? Shouldn't you be at internships?
My intern is currently learning a thing or two from Amy, Aizawa sighed. At least, I hope he's learning. Actually, I think she just might be teaching him how to prank people. Can we come in?
Of course. Midoriya-san stood to the side to allow the two to come in. Toshinori didn't know what he'd been expecting the apartment to look like, but if anyone had asked, he'd probably say that he'd been expecting a library, to complement young Midoriya's intelligence. Instead, the house looked cozy and surprisingly normal for a place where one of the most controversial up-and-coming heroes had grown up. Aizawa gestured boredly to Toshinori.
By the way, this is my coworker Yagi. He's an assistant teacher at UA, and no, I'm not going to tell you which hero he is. You know how important secrecy is in the hero industry sometimes. Just know that Nezu assigned him to come along with me on these visits.
Alright, keep your secrets. Midoriya-san smiled. So, I see that even Nezu can't manage to keep my baby out of trouble. I went and visited Izuku in the hospital yesterday. He said you grounded him.
He deserved it.
Aizawa hid his face in his capture weapon.
Damn problem child.
Midoriya-san laughed. Believe me, I know. I did raise him after all. If there's anything I've learned about my son, it's that he'll do what he believes to be right, and he'll figure out how to make it work, despite whatever obstacles are in his way. In fact, he'll often use these obstacles to help him in ways I never would have thought about. It's amazing. Aizawa sent Toshinori a heavy look, one that seemed to be saying, "See?" Toshinori decidedly didn't react.
So, I'm sure you've already seen Nezu's press conference, so you already know why we're here.
Aizawa said finally. Ah, yes, the dorms, Midoriya said. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried, but, well, Izuku has a tendency to find trouble. At least if he's at UA, he has the tools and support he needs to deal with that. Aizawa nodded.
Of course. I promise you we'll do our best to protect your son.
Midoriya chuckled. You can try, but as long as Izuku's happy, you have my thanks. Aizawa let out an amused huff and stood up.
Well, if you don't have any other questions, we'll be on our way. We need to finish these visits so I can get back to my intern before Amy somehow corrupts him. Have a good day, Midoriya-san.
I will. And congratulations, by the way. Midoriya-san's eyes twinkled with mischief. I always thought you two would be a cute couple.
Aizawa glared at her before walking out the door. You're dead to me.
Toshinori was about to follow, but hesitated by the door and looked back. Aizawa had said to leave the talking to him, but Toshinori felt like he had to know.
Midoriya-san, do you truly believe your son is safest at UA?
Midoriya looked at him with a kind of compassionate understanding that took him aback slightly. You're talking about his quirklessness, right? She didn't wait for him to confirm it before continuing. If I'm being honest, if you'd come to me a year ago and asked, I would have taken Izuku out of UA in a heartbeat. Anything to keep him safe, but, well, my son is many things, but weak is not one of them. I spent too many years thinking that just because he was quirkless, he may as well be made of glass, but, well... She frowned and looked off into the distance. Is his safety really worth the price of his happiness? Yes, I could lock him up here and protect him. He'd be safe, but then I wouldn't get to see his eyes light up the way they do when he's analyzing a new quirk. I wouldn't get to see the pride in his eyes that I see when he comes home from a successful mission.
So, even though it's dangerous?
Toshinori prompted. She took a deep breath. It's worth it. If my worry is what it takes for my son to be happy, then it's a price I'm more than willing to pay. She looked at Toshinori, and he felt like she was staring deep into his soul. Not every quirkless kid wants to be a hero, Yagi-san. But Izuku does. Treating him like something to be protected and put on a shelf isn't going to help anyone. So, yes, it's dangerous, and it gives me a heart attack every time he puts on his hero costume, but I truly believe my son can be a hero. Does that answer your question? Yagi didn't know how she'd peeled back his politeness and managed to answer his actual question, but he supposed that young Midoriya had to have gotten his observational skills from somewhere. He glanced over at the car, where Aizawa was glaring at him, probably about to storm back into the apartment and drag him away if he didn't leave soon.
Yes, that answered all my questions quite well, thank you. It was a pleasure to meet you.
He hurried to the car and got in, avoiding Aizawa's eyes. After a long moment, Aizawa sighed and started the car.
Were you at least polite about whatever opinion you should have kept to yourself?
Toshinori was too lost in his thoughts to respond. One of the reasons he'd been so against young Midoriya becoming a hero since the beginning was because he'd known that he wouldn't have been able to be a hero without One for All, but, well, maybe if he'd had someone like young Midoriya's mother, who was willing to put his happiness and dreams above his safety. Before he could think better of it, Toshinori texted Nezu and asked for a few days off in the coming weeks or so. As terrifying as Gran Torino could be, he'd never steered him wrong before, and there were so many different thoughts and opinions whirling around inside his brain that Toshinori couldn't even tell where to begin. He didn't know if he was wrong, right, or just as much of an idiot as Aizawa seemed to think, but he wanted to figure it out. Nezu sent his approval before they even reached the next student's house.